for our purposes too, like we can't write too much in that sort of momentary way, because we also have to be thinking a little bit more long term about it, for reasons we'll get into in a minute. But like, if you've only ever run home games, I would recommend you try running some public games sometime, because it's like the training montage in like Rocky 4, where you're out there just like hauling logs and stuff like that and punching tires, because it really toughens up and hones your GM abilities, because you have to be able to think quickly. You have to learn to read the people at the table. You have to learn to sort of navigate conflict in a healthy way. It makes you better at thinking quickly. It makes you better at making quick decisions and moving the story along when you have just a very limited time with these people and they're counting on you to have a good time. And, you want to have a good time too. But yeah, like a lot of conventions, like some conventions hire us to come and run their tabletop. Some conventions look for volunteers. If you live in an area where they have a convention that does that and they're asking for volunteers to run, you should definitely go do it. Just because you may not like it, but at least you'll have tried it. And, there's a decent chance you're going to have a fun time. There's there's probably a slightly smaller chance that you're going to have an awkward time. And then there's a really small chance probably that somebody's going to be real weird and you're going to have to learn to deal with it. But that in itself is growth.
Yeah, I would say, make sure you're really comfortable with the idea that you're playing with people you've never played with before. Mm-hmm. And there is going to be unique challenges to that. But for the most part, everybody who's sitting down at your table is just there to have a good time. Yeah. Now, their definition of a good time may be different from yours, and you'll have to navigate that. But it's a pretty cool way for most of these cons to get a free badge.
Yeah. And, you can't make assumptions about anybody. You have to like do a lot of conversation up front about like, hey, if there's something you absolutely can't have in this adventure, let me know, which could be a pain if you've just written this whole adventure that's predicated on spiders. And then two people are like, I have severe arachnophobia, so please no. You have to pivot, and you have to pivot really quick. Maybe like it's a monstrous teddy bear and it's just a bunch of teddy bears taking over or something. And you need to ask people stuff up front, like, hey, talk to me about your pronouns, just to make sure that you don't misgender somebody or anything like that. You really have to be upfront about what you need to be able to help them have a good time.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like Brandon said, it is one of the best ways to really sharpen your GMing skills. Like, you don't realize how much easier you are having it by having a home group that knows your idiosyncrasies and know theirs, because
it makes you a better performer too.
Yeah, because you kind of adjust for the table, because you're like, all right, well, I know, this guy's not really big into big talky scenes. This guy's not really big into combat. So I'll do this and I'll do this. And this is kind of like this person's favorite thing to engage with. So I'll just work this into the campaign as well. When you're playing with complete strangers, it's like, you have to be ready to pivot when the thing they are presented with is not something they are interested in. I know Brandon's tired of hearing me tell this story, but very early on in our writing, we discovered that you can put a lot of effort and investment into something like NPCs. And then every table at the event is like, I don't want to interact with that guy.
Yeah. And like, you get the people sometimes who've never played before and just immediately they want to go murder hobo. And you've spent all this time crafting this world, and they're like, I want to steal all the liquor in the tavern. And then you get to have the conversation with them about how, like, life is about choices and you can make choices, but usually there are consequences for choices. So I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying that.
I think my solution to that was also not a good one, where I was like, oh, well, if it's a non-optional NPC encounter, then I'll just make sure that they have to encounter the NPC.
He just keeps showing up.
Well, what that led to was a lot of GMs being like, I don't know what to tell you guys. The book says you have to talk to this person. And the players being like, no, we don't want to talk to that person. We hate that person. I like, from my perspective as a writer, I was like, well, that's not very fun for anyone, myself included.
No. But anyway, we sort of got derailed there a little bit talking about running like public games. But bottom line, it's a blast, except for the very rare times when it's not a blast. I remember one of the Galaxy Cons we were working, and I had a table, and within 5 minutes, I knew that this was not going to be a good experience because I just had people who didn't want to roll with it, people who felt like tabletop should be played in a very particular way. And at like a certain point, like I just sort of had to surrender to the wave. And I've told people this before, but like during that particular experience, I just had to sort of like acknowledge to myself that I was, for the next 2 hours and 45 minutes, I was not going to have fun. And I just had to power through it. And I did my best. But man, when that was over, I was happy to be done with that table. And it's not like they were playing wrong or anything, you know, like they had their own way of playing, and the way I like to play was different, but also like they weren't willing to give me anything. Like there was no partnership in the storytelling there, and they were just combative the whole way. And I was just like, ugh, it was exhausting.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I can say to anyone who's just starting out in writing things and in GMing is be as non-combative with your table as physically possible. It should be a collaboration. Because anytime you come to the table with like, oh, well, you need to be doing things a specific way because of how I've written it, you are setting yourself and your table up for a very bad time.
That gets into the book argument. Like anytime you're prescriptive about a decision that the players have to like underline, italicize, bold, have to make, then you're sort of treading into that I'm writing a book territory. And I've said this 1,000 times too, but like once you create something and put it out into the world, it's not yours anymore. So you're allowing people to engage with it so they get to have their own spin on it as well. And fault is not the right word, but it's the one I'm going to use right now. The fault lies in your failure of imagination when you were writing it, about like you did not stop to think about how other people might interact, engage with your world and your story. You have to at least come up with some options, and that only helps you as you do it. And you don't have to build out a whole new branch of your story. You just have to be like, okay, well, they can take this little detour, and if they do that, then I'll just weave them back up here. And you give yourself options, and then they probably take sort of an approach that's different from all the three paths that you've laid out, but you just find the one that's closest fit. You change the details really quickly in your head, and then you move it forward. But yeah, you have to anticipate that they're going to make a choice that you did not predict. And to help combat that, you have to predict. You have to give yourself some thoughts. It's like the snake gun that we talked about on the stream, where you were like, yeah, this thing's going to shoot snakes out. I said, make some mechanics for that thing to be used as a gun, because somebody is going to pull it out of the wall and use it as a weapon. And you're like, come on. And then literally every table, somebody did that.
My initial instinct, and this goes back to me being like, oh, well, there is a correct way to run this game, is, oh, well, if they rip it out of the wall, then it just doesn't work because the mechanics of it are in the wall. And it's like, all right, sure, but that's not very fun. Like, you give people an opportunity to experience something really cool, and then you're like, oh, but you can't have it. That's my toy, and you're not allowed to play with it. Right.
Yeah, if you have toys you don't want other people to play with, make sure you put them away before somebody comes over. That's the rule.